Now fire me up. Now fire me up. Get on the dance floor. 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 Now fire.
Welcome to the Security Disciple Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Melendez, president and owner of MFE WareGeeks. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, welcome everyone to the next podcast of the Security Disciple, Seth Melendez. And my guest today is Mike Ficara. How you doing, Mike?
Man, I'm wonderful, Seth. First off, man, appreciate you having me on. I'm super stoked.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate you accepting my invitation. I'm a little guy compared to you guys. So I appreciate you, taking the time out. So what is it that you do, Mike? I know what you do. And, we are both part of the Bold Accelerator program, but What is it that you do?
Well, if you know the answer to what I do, you're leagues ahead of where I am. Because
okay, so then maybe I have misconception.
It's one of the hardest questions for me to answer. It's funny a little bit.
I didn't know you were a pimp. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm Italian, so I really can't fully divulge in here what I do. But we'll get into it a little bit.
Something like that, right?
Yeah. It's funny. I started my career as a teacher in the classroom, mostly because I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I loved teaching. I loved education. But it was very easy back then when people asked me what I did. What did you do? Oh, I'm a teacher. Oh, what do you teach? It's, very simple conversation, good flow, a lot of hot topics to talk about as a teacher. I taught for the better part of 10 years, and then I went and sort of entered the entrepreneurial community. And really for about the last 9 years, I worked with a variety of different businesses, from startups to major corporations. But basically what we do is we help small to medium-sized businesses grow and scale. And it's something I'm very passionate about. And we do it by looking at three key areas, really. It's marketing, sales, and implementation. You could go, most businesses go one of those routes. And we work with a lot of solopreneurs or family-owned businesses where people have started a business, they're seeing growth, and they don't know how to either stabilize that growth or they've hit a ceiling and they really want to hockey stick that growth. So we come in and say, okay, let's look at your lead generation. How are you marketing? How are you attracting customers? How are you growing your business? How are you approaching them in the sales process? How are you pitching them? How are you telling them about your business? And then more importantly, once they are a client, how are you maintaining them? Are they getting the services they requested? And are we able to continue to grow in that relationship so that either A, we can sell them more products or sell them more services, or B, how can we have them refer us to other people? So we really look at the whole process. And I've been fortunate enough to be able through the years, really filter out and work with and partner with some amazing people that really specialize in each one of those areas. I'm really, kind of the guy that oversees everything. But I've found some really key ninja people that are just excellent at what they do in those spaces. Some former C-level executives from major corporations that said, we want to enter the entrepreneurial spaces, don't know how. So it was kind of a win-win. And I was able to really get some good talent and work with some great people, and form some great partnerships that allow me to really help businesses grow and scale. So that's the elevator pitch.
So you would be almost part of business management and a lot of marketing in that area also.
Yeah, kind of like the outsourced COO is the best way to describe it. I'll give you an example. One business, she came to me, she's paying someone a little bit of money to do marketing. She's hired a few people. And it's just, she has some standard operating procedures she's put together. And I told her, I said, you really have all the Legos, and my kids love Legos. I said, you have all the Legos. You just don't have the instructions on what you should be building. And we put that instruction manual together, hand it off to a business and say, here you go. And they either keep us around and they say, hey, that's great, we have the instruction, can you actually build it for us? And we do that, and we build and operate and run it. Or sometimes they have enough talent in-house where after that we just say, hey, you're good, you got the talent, you got the legs, go ahead and run with it,
Right. Yeah, maybe one day I can afford you.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I had, someone posted on social media the other day, they're like, do you take equity or do you take a retainer? And, it's one of those, clickbait or, comment, engagement things somebody put out there, which is fine. And there was some interesting things, but I put on there, I said, listen, you got to do what works best for you. And I always tell people, I've got 4 kids. I can't feed my kids equity flakes.
Right.
So, and it's one of the toughest things for me because I have, in all seriousness, I love startups. I love the newness of them. I love the beginning of them. I love coming in and seeing what you can do. And I love small business because I really believe that's where great things come out of. And I wish I could, in more situations, work for just equity. And I've done it before. And sometimes it worked out great. Sometimes it didn't. But it's really, really hard. And it's one, I think, the hardest things for entrepreneurs is, to know your value and know what you can charge and should charge. Don't overcharge. being consistent in charging, but it's one of the things that I really had to learn a lot throughout my career. So I'm never against the equity thing. And I know you say maybe one day you could afford me, but I also love working with all different types of businesses.
Right.
So sometimes I'm just intrigued, and I'm like, I tell people this is my hobby too. So like I work and then I work some more for fun,
If you can make a hobby, have a hobby and make money at it, it's the best.
Yeah. No, a hobby's supposed to cost you money. A hobby doesn't make you money, right? Yeah, a hobby's supposed to be a money bit. So like I work with, everybody that should be paying me more. That's my hobby, And my business.
Like Grant Carden's description, if it isn't making you money, it's an expensive hobby.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So we're both part of the Bold Accelerator program, and it's done wonders for me. And just to the people that don't understand, I have not talked about it. It's actually the first time that I've actually talked about this on my podcast. So can you give a description of what this is about?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll take it back to my teaching days, right? Like, my kids used to hate when I would assign group projects, but it's the way they learn the best. When they got with a bunch of different people, different skills, they were able to work and grow together. One of the things about this time of year, and obviously this is going to air a little after we're recording it, but I know here in Florida, a lot of people are starting school these next 2 weeks, right? So I see a lot of people on Facebook and putting the teacher workshops in the beginning of school and the newness and the freshness. And a lot of people are going to, a lot of schools do strategy workshops this week. They get people that come in and speak. And I saw one was like, know your why. And then they teach them different skills. And in education, we're famous for this. They do this in the beginning of the school year. They bring everybody together. They train them. They teach them. And then they send them out to work throughout the school year. And then throughout the year, they have professional development days, which as kids we loved, right? Because we got them off from school. And as teachers, it was a day that, we call them teacher work days. And my dad always gets around me and says, what do you do the rest of the days? But they're days where they come in and they continue to train you on those skills. So one of the things that always fascinated me after I left the classroom is you don't see this much in corporate America. You don't see it that much in the entrepreneurial space. And really the Bold Accelerator really allows us to do that. I mean, we're coming together weekly to learn new skills, to learn how to better, like you said, grow our businesses, learn different techniques when it comes to marketing and sales and messaging. And more importantly, I think Brian Cristiano, who put it together, who's kind of the leader of it, he really has done a great job of, he's done it. He's literally started a business, had it kind of fall apart. And then, as he says, he got off the couch and rebuilt it into this multi-million-dollar company that he wants to grow into a $100 million company. And more importantly, not only does he want to do that, he's taking us along on the ride in the Bold Accelerator and letting us learn from him, connecting us with the people that he knows. So it's kind of like that professional development we used to get when I was a teacher, I feel like, and it allows us to network with great people like you and I have been able to network. I've met Andrew, who was just here, who just left, is a videographer who's helped me on a bunch of projects. I met him through the Bold Accelerator. I've met clients. So it's a great place to meet clients. It's a great place to find talent. And it's a great place to network. So, I mean, to describe it, I think it's just a cohort of learners, if you will, is the best way I think I could describe it to your listeners. And it's just a massively amazing, underrated networking opportunity, if you ask me.
Yeah, I definitely concur. I've taken a lot out of this. It's taught me a lot in different ways that I felt were missing, the strategy-wise, and also that pre-strategy of why you're doing it, why we should go in that direction. There's a lot of things that Brian has done that has helped me coalesce and actually remove ideas and things that I thought were part of the equation. Then when you look at it, you go, it's a waste of time for me to go down the way. Or I don't have the resources to do that. Let me start smaller and then build that into phase 4 or phase 5 or things like that, instead of everybody wants to do everything in one time. And I think with business, a lot of times, when you first start, you ask people, who is it your market? Oh, I want everyone. That's the problem, right? That's the one. You have to know what you're talking about, who you're talking. That 5-minute or 2-minute elevator pitch, like you were just referencing a little while ago. You want to condense things down, but you also want to remember it, and you want to. It's part of your soul. I think a lot of times you hear people, and I've seen it happen where you talk to people at different groups and different events, and you ask them things, and they go, "Oh, my accountant handles that. Oh, I got a social media guy for that." Like, but you don't know it yourself. How is it that you don't know? Maybe you may not get into the nitty gritty on what app you use for posting. Okay, you may not know that. If you don't native, but you should know your plan. And you had any input for that, in a sense, giving
Oh yeah, and I think, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. So many, I'm big on knowing what I'm good and knowing what I'm not good at. And when I'm not good at, I don't try to do. I either outsource, and even within my house, right?
Right.
I'll pay someone to cut my lawn, because especially here in Florida, it's worth the $30 every 2 weeks instead of me going out there and sweating and dying and doing it. But on the same hand, like you said, you can't outsource and give up things in your business.
Right.
If you don't. I need to know enough to know that the guy I'm paying, that I can trust him.
You're getting the value out of it, right?
You know what I mean? And that it's being done right, and that it goes in the right direction. Like you said, do I know anything about accounting? No. But do I know enough about accounting to know if I'm talking to a good accountant? You know what I mean? Do I know a lot about, social media ads? Absolutely not. But do I know enough to know if I'm talking to somebody about social media ads, whether or not they're full of, what?
Right.
So I think, and that's the idea, right? And that's what the accelerator does, is you need, I always said, you need to go deep on one thing. I think, you mentioned it. So many entrepreneurs I meet want to say, well, I do everything. It's like, well, who can you help? This is especially true in marketing. Oh, well, we could do it all. We could do it all. And it's like, okay, I get it. But what's the one thing you're really good at? What's the one ninja skill that you have? And go deep on that. And it's okay to know, and then I think you go wide on everything else that you need a little bit of knowledge on. You know what I mean? And
right.
in business, I think that's what the accelerator does, especially with the vast amount of people in there and the different industries and the different things they do.
And the perspective.
We're able to get that perspective and hear from them and learn a little bit and stay sharp. But more importantly than anything, and I think if, the last, 10 years as an entrepreneur has taught me anything, is this market, this economy, this world, the technology, relationships are organic. So if you said anything as like an absolute truth, or you said anything as like, well, I know this, you know what I mean? Like I was a ninja on Windows XP. You know what I mean? Like you put it, but that skill is meaningless now. You know what I mean? But like, I mean, you put an operating system in front of me now. Like I couldn't even tell you like how to like do 90% of the things that are in there. I've lost that skill. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So because things are changing so fast and they're so organic, we have to continue to learn, but we have to look at the things that are important. You know what I mean? Like back then I had to know that because that was an important skill, because in education, so much was happening with technology. Me being tech savvy got me an extra period off because I was able to help the tech guy fix things, which let me, study more for my master's and do the different things I wanted to do and grow in the school and learn more about technology, which later helped me in other careers. So I think it's about always learning and always understanding that there's no absolute truths. You never stop. I don't, like, even if you're an accountant, the numbers don't change. They still add and subtract the same way, but the rules around them are so organic and always moving, and you have to constantly be learning and constantly be growing. I think so key.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And by the way, I remember a statement years ago when you were talking about the teacher performance days, or the days ago. I worked at New York Board of Education for about 2 years as a consultant, and they used to call that low dosage days. Yeah. So they didn't have to double up on their medications and the days they didn't have to deal with the students. So they used to jokingly refer to that low dosage days. Yeah. So the teachers over there were definitely overworked and crazy. So I understand your idea on how they the training that they get a lot of times, back to what you were saying, a lot of times, and I think a lot of people somehow feel like you or I are business people, but you're out there consulting others. But some people feel, well, why do you need it? And why do I need it? Why do I need to go to talk to somebody? And I actually had that conversation with a friend of mine. Why do I need to go to this guy? I know what I'm doing when it comes to business. Really? You know what it is to take a business from 0 to 1 million? Have you ever done it? So some people think that going to the Bold is somehow a negative, and it's like, oh, you're just wasting money. And it's like, no, that's not true. One, you make contact. It's the reason why people go to Princeton. Yeah, a lot of it is your relationships. And if I deal with a guy like you and another guy like Brian's on his way to doing, $10, $20 million, it's a perspective that I don't have access to. And he can tell me things on my way up when I was do 500,000, when I do 1 million, when I do 2 million, that I wouldn't know any other way, And so a lot of guys don't understand that education that we're getting, similar to teachers, gets them to the next level and helps them deal with some of this madness in this real world. So, and I think this education that we're doing with Bold and Brian, and all the people he brings, because I've gotten so many things, especially the Bold University that we were both part of, I received so much out of that, that helped me. And every time we do a class, one of our sessions, I get something else out of it that helps me focus or, condense or things like that I didn't know before. And it makes it much easier. You have that experience?
Yeah. I mean, there's one thing I've learned too. It's so funny. It's like, listen, and everyone has their opinions on these things, but I set out and I was probably, have we done this about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I would have said the same thing that your friend said. Well, that's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. You can learn all that stuff for free online. Right.
You got YouTube.
And in a way they're not wrong. You know what I mean? But for me, it's two things that I've learned over the last 2 years that I've really gone in depth on. And it's how I connected with Brian. I started to really try to connect and listen to and follow massively successful people, which by success, is not always a dollar amount thing. It's not always like they're making a lot of money, but they had balance in their life, right? They liked what they were doing. They were successful. They had goals. They were hitting them. They were able to learn from their mistakes. They were respected in their industries. And these are people, making very little money and people making very, a lot of money. There's people I, saw that had very good work life and family balance. I really connected and started asking a lot of these people questions. And no matter what level they were at, everybody that I talked to had two constants. And those two things were that, number one, they had a mentor or coach that they looked up to. So they had somebody that was guiding them that they could go to seek advice from. And the second thing was that they were constantly investing in themselves and learning more. That could have been through reading books, going to conferences, investing in things like this Bold Accelerator. But it was the idea and the concept of they never stop learning. Right. And it wasn't ever a financial question for them. It was how can I continue to get access, learn information, and learn from more people? And then as I started to go to more and more events, because I felt that I started to meet more and more successful people. Tim Story is a perfect example. We heard him speak at Brian's thing. He was kind of a surprise guest. I saw him at a conference about 4 or 5 months ago. And that conference was selling a business finishing school you could learn by Matt Monero. Excellent program, and Tim Story, here's a guy that's massively successful. He says, I was back there and he goes, hearing Matt talk about that, I want to get my hands on it because I want to learn more. And he, these people just continue to want to learn more. Now, maybe was he endorsing it because he was speaking to the conference to help sell it? Maybe. But the more and more people I met that were successful, they continue to invest in themselves. They continue to learn. They learn from each other. They share knowledge. And I think, what a lot of people don't realize is, you hear a lot of, and I don't want to get political, but you hear a lot of people talk about, well, the 1% and this, and they leave people out. It's like, well, for the first time, and it's like, we're not even realizing it, the access to knowledge and information of the people who are successful is not only accessible, because it's been accessible for a while through books and different things like that. It's not only accessible, but we can now actually connect and speak to the people who are successful.
Yeah.
That's so it just blows my mind that you could have read a book 30 years ago and to try to contact the author, maybe you could have written them a letter and you'd hear from them. If you're moved by something, you could follow someone on Instagram or Facebook or, wherever and reach out to them. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, they're going to get back to you.
Right.
How amazing is it now? And to your friend's point, maybe it is a waste of money, but we all got to grow somehow. And the truth is, if you're not growing, you're dying. You know what I mean? So, and some people are happy at the plateaus. Some people settle and they want to live on the plateaus, and that's beautiful and that's good for them. And you can't push them anymore. And not everybody needs to want to climb to that mountaintop, but if you want to get to the mountaintop, you have to be asking these questions and you have to be investing in yourself.
And I think with people who are your peers, as you said, successful people, no different than whatever endeavor you get into. There's always people moving up that ladder with you or near you, and you're always sharing. I work with kids, at-risk kids over at this program. I teach computers to them, and we're doing basics. And they started moving forward when they started helping each other, because one remembered something, the other one didn't. The other one is very great at this, so he started passing information when I wasn't there. So once they started doing that, they realized they work better together, and now they're advancing quicker because now it's that combined knowledge that they keep going. And it's no different when you move to the business and anything else, whatever endeavor you go to. When you start finding successful people or people who are struggling or doing what you do. So you're finding, if you're baseball, my nephew played baseball, he learned how to hit from another kid. You know, he was bad at hitting. You know, he was bad at curveballs. He was bad at sliders. Another kid taught him. You know, and so he wasn't the coaches. He learned from another kid.
Well, I'll tell you a story with that because you know my son was playing baseball and it's big here in Florida. And he was in T-ball. No, he was in coach pitch. I think he was like 5 or 6 years old, and you know he was all right. You know, he wasn't good, but he wasn't really bad, but he was all right. You know, and the coach came to me and he says, "Listen, you know, he really loves the game. He seems to be enjoying it." He goes, "I really recommend you get him a hitting coach." And I was like, okay, well, this kid's 6 years old. And I'm like, well, okay, how much is a hitting coach? He's like, well, it's like, you know, $95 a session, whatever it was. I said, the kid could barely piss in the toilet straight. I said, I'm going to hire a pissing coach before I'm going to hire a hitting coach. And, you know, it's one of those things where we have to realize and look at that stage in life, he doesn't need that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I only say that because it's like, now in business, I could have invested in the Bold Accelerator at a point where my business may not have made sense. You know, for me right now, it made sense. And a lot of people just aren't mature enough in their business. Like, I don't think my son was mature enough to have a hitting coach teaching him. And I'm sorry, at 6 years old, you should just be enjoying baseball and playing on the field, not like refining your hit with a hitting coach once a week. You know what I mean? It's like, that's not what the game's about, you know? And I have no aspirations of him going pro or anything like that. To me, it's just about a game having fun. But if he says, Dad, I want to be a professional baseball player when I'm growing up, then I sit down and have the conversation. Okay, son, I'm willing to invest in you, but you got to be willing to do the things to sacrifice for that investment. And not everyone in business is. It's a tough line. And that's why I think a lot of people, you got to, and the great thing is there's a wealth of opportunity out there. You really got to invest in what's best for you right now. You know, and I think that's the most important thing that people have to understand is finding what the best fit is for them. And culturally, like you said, you and I in the Bold Accelerator, and even at the event we had in New York, I think a lot of us all had the same energy. Like, we not only learned together, we had a lot of fun afterwards outside of the event together too. So it's like, you got to have a little bit of that synergy as well, you know?
Right. So one of the things that, you know, just so my nephew, when he was about the same age, was actually playing golf, and he had to get a hitting coach or had to learn how to hit because golf was throwing a swing on.
Yeah.
Which was funny because at that time, there weren't many kids going straight into golfing. So he was at the height of Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
And so he went straight into golfing, and it threw off his hitting.
Yeah.
When he started learning how to hit, he couldn't hit. He had to learn how to hit better because golfing was throwing him off.
Yeah.
So, but it's a learning lesson to people, you know. And what we were talking about of learning, you know, one of the things I always say is I follow Edison's mantra of, I only know one way to run a business. I can tell you 1,000 ways how not to run a business.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a company that has 2-3 million in the bank, but I can tell you what not to do and what pitfalls are out there.
Yes.
And, you know, 'cause this is now my 4th iteration of a company. I've been in other companies and I've had a previous IT company. And I can tell you what not to do.
Yeah.
You know, and all the mistakes that I made. So,
yeah, and I would say, you know, it's funny you mentioned that too, because even a lot of times what I see in businesses I consult with, you know, and I'm a big patterns guy, and you know, it's funny, what separates a successful business from a failing business is not much.
Right. Exactly.
You know, it really isn't. I mean, I've seen businesses run the exact same way, and one, you know, literally not only crashed into the ground and went to the 7th layer of hell, and then the other one's just floating up into the air, just keeps doing well. It's like, well, what are they doing different? It's, you know, it's industry, it's niche, it's product, it's service. But as far as the back end of how the business runs, it's, you know, is being more organized going to help your business? Sure. Is having a better marketing plan going to help your business? Sure. But at the end of the day, there's certain intangibles where some things are just meant to succeed and some things are meant to fail.
Right.
So it's, and I think the toughest thing as an entrepreneur and a business owner, especially, you know, during the time of you invest into a business, is knowing when to walk away from the one that's not working, you know?
That is the hardest thing.
Sometimes it's just going with your intuition, you know, it's like sports, right? Like, and, you know, we were talking baseball, the same thing. Listen, you could be, you know, A-Rod was, you know, probably better baseball player in Seattle than he was in New York, but he won a hell of a lot more rings in New York than he did in Seattle. It's not how he played baseball. It's the environment he was in. It's the location. It's so in business, it's the same thing. And I think that's what a lot of people got to understand. It's not, and a lot of people want to take, you know, I kid around, everyone's like, oh, well, look at Mark Zuckerberg. I'm like, the guy made one business. He hasn't done anything. He got Facebook.
But along the way, he had a lot of the resources.
You know, like, but not a bad one-hit wonder to be. You know what I mean? But you know, has he really grown multiple businesses? No, he basically grew Facebook, like.
And he had the right people coming at the right time, and he had the right connections because with Stanford, right?
Yeah, Harvard.
Whichever I thought it was Stanford, but yeah, whichever one it was, he still that's a lot of good connections there. You see, if I want to open up a branch,
at the end of the day, he wasn't first to market, and,
right.
and forget the whole Winklevoss thing. There was Friendster, there was MySpace, there was all he wasn't first to market. He wasn't the only product out there, and he still isn't the only product out there. Yeah, and he's winning. And that's the thing of it. You got to look at, and listen, the guy's a genius. I'm not downplaying Mark Zuckerberg, but the point I'm trying to make is that it's not a matter of, as an entrepreneur, it's not a matter of, are you the best or are you the most organized? Are you the smartest? Sometimes it's just about being in the right place at the right time. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're not, what Mark Zuckerberg was resilient. He never gave up, how many people, if you were getting sued, would be like, oh, I guess I got to stop. I'm getting sued. You know what I mean? He kept going. That's what let him be successful. So I think a lot of times in business, people take those failures that you mentioned and they see them as stops. They see them as dead ends when really they're just stop signs.
Right. Or even pauses.
Yeah. And that, you know what I mean? And they're like, oh, it's a dead end. I can't go any further. No, it's just a stop sign. And you got to wait for the traffic to move. And then you could keep going. And I think the more you're able, and I think the successful entrepreneurs are able to see that much sooner than other people. You know what I mean? I think that's what separates kind of the men from the boys. But I think we all get there eventually. You know what I mean? It just takes, and it takes one project, one client, one contract to drastically change your life, Yeah,
definitely. And so here's one question I usually pose to people in different businesses. So how is it that you're leveraging technology, especially when things are moving so fast and things are coming out every other day? There's a new app. Every other day, there's something new. So how are you focusing or utilizing technology for your business? Technology?
I mean, a lot of old school stuff. I live and die by Outlook. I live and die by my Outlook calendar. I tell people if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist. So if you say you want to meet with me and you don't send me a calendar invite or I don't send you one, it usually doesn't happen. I do use, my team is not based here in the office completely. My project manager, Ryan, like I mentioned, he's in Orlando. So we use Trello for a lot of our project management type stuff, just kind of air traffic controlling day to day. And then obviously, social media is big for me. And just, I put out a lot of content, not a lot of content. I put out some content and it's helped with just, kind of messaging, connecting with people, staying in the forefront of things and kind of going in that direction. So, I tell people, though, if it wasn't for technology, I'd probably be a garbage man. Even when I taught, I don't think I could have taught without PowerPoint. For me, technology is really the lever that holds me up. I think for me, it's just I was born in the right time. It's very helpful to me. If I didn't have it, I think things would be very difficult for me. So, I mean, how do I leverage technology in, probably multiple ways, but probably not enough either. And there's some things I do old school, but I'm pretty much, rely on most of the tech that I have,
Right. I actually heard a Navy SEAL guy said, if the enemy ever wanted to do damage to the United States, it's not going to be a kinetic, fight. He says, all they got to do is put a bug into Microsoft Office and destroy all the PowerPoint and everything else. And they can't sit there and get approvals. And PowerPoint, he's like, if you do that, we're done. We can't do anything.
Yeah. I'd be dead.
Saying that to you, there's a problem.
Yeah. We went to the doctor's office this morning for the kids for school to get their physicals, and it was a new doctor, and it was me and my wife, and we got 4 kids. So the lady says, "Well, you could fill out 2, and your husband could fill out 2." My wife goes, "I wouldn't do that to you." My husband's handwriting is so bad, She goes, "He types everything."
Exactly. Yeah, my wife says it's chicken scratch. It's like I'm writing as a lefty.
Yep. Oh, that's funny.
So, yeah, it's funny. But so is there anything that you're looking to that you've been thinking about working with technology-wise and you haven't pulled the trigger yet, or anything that you think is interesting on the horizon for businesses?
I think what you do is fascinating. I think the unseen, you hit the nail on the head, talking about the Navy SEAL thing. For me, we do put so much of our lives, I've got, my kids' memories are all in here, We don't have photo albums. We don't have, it's just, and then everything in my business, like you said, contracts, all these massive documents we create. I mean, if I, papered them, it'd probably fill the room. It makes no sense for me to print everything out and have backups of it. So I would say, and you probably experience this a lot, right? The biggest thing I take all this stuff for granted until it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you take everything for granted until your email gets hacked, or, and now everything's in the cloud, right? Like everything's, in Dropbox and everything's in my iCloud. It's like, well, if that shit goes down, man, I'm in trouble, So I would say I probably take for granted the things I don't know and I don't see. And it's probably one of the areas I'm really weak in and vulnerable in right now, which good for me for putting this out on the podcast. Get hired. Yeah, I would say that lack.
I got your back, man. Don't worry, but I got your back.
yeah. And I mean, and with that being said, right, I imagine I'm not alone. Like,
right.
You see this a lot. I mean, how many people like me are out there? I mean, is this the norm, or am I on an island?
No, it's coming out so fast that people don't understand. Everything's getting hacked, so people get nervous. Everywhere you turn, they don't know the level they don't know the severity of the type of hacks. They don't know what's going on, and they're so used to, well, that works, so I'm going to stick to that. And they don't realize that over time, certain things are degrading in security. And there's a lot of new technology comes out, but like anything else, it's oversold.
Yeah.
And they forget about all the underlying insecurity in it. One of the biggest things is IoT. Everybody's got, all these, like right here, my environmental keeps going off because every time I move, the motion goes off on my lights.
Right.
You have motion sensors. You have, I have my my thermostat. I have a lot of things, and these are most biggest insecurities in people's houses right now. And as you put them on, it's growing. And in business, a lot of the same things as your data. Your data is the most important thing, and a lot of people are not protecting their data. If this is your, I can't remember what running back it was. He says, this ball is my life. This ball is my baby. When I get on that field, you will never get that baby from me. That ball, you would have to kill me to get that ball out of my hand. And that's how people have to think when it comes to their business, is you have to protect that data, because data is your lifeblood. It doesn't matter what business you're in. And that's where I'm seeing a lot of people don't take it. Oh yeah, my son does my IT, and the kid's like 12. You're going to put your business and your livelihood? It's like, if you were a cabbie, you're going to say, yeah, I let my kid drive my car, 3 days a week. It's the same analogy to me. So you're going to put your livelihood, your cab, in your son's hand, 16, to go drive around with his girl or his boys, and next day you may not go to work.
Right.
It's the same to me.
Right. And it's what let, I'm going to turn 40 this year, and I would say it's what's let us 90s babies win, right? Like, it's what let us win with technology. There was such a gap, coming out of high school and college in my 20s. And it's really what let me get my foothold in education. Because I was never a good student and I didn't do really well in college, but I substitute taught, and, I was substitute teaching, and then I ended up, the librarian actually got pregnant and got put on bed rest, and they put me in the library. Well, I didn't know anything about the library, but I knew a lot about technology, and I saw, DVD players sitting in the corner, people didn't know how to hook up, and computers that didn't work. And I started fixing all this stuff. And then that's the way I ended up getting a job teaching in the classroom. But I think it's the gap between, really the millennials and the Gen X and the baby boomers not knowing about technology. And like you said, taking it for granted. And they, the absence of knowledge, it seemed like it was a young man's game for so long. Well, that, let the kids do it. And it seemed like a computer was a toy almost. And I think a lot of people took it for granted. I agree with you. I think putting technology in the hands, and I think the younger generation always seems to move faster with it. Mm-hmm. And I was having this conversation with someone yesterday. I think it's because even like my kids, they don't have the fear of breaking it, right? Like my grandmother, she passed away several years ago, but I remember when we got our first computer, she was always scared she was going to break it. I'm like, you really can't break it by using it, I said, you're just going to click around and do things. So I think it's that fear of, the younger generation always has a lack of fear of breaking it. And, we were kind of, the 90s babies. I was born in 1980. So growing up in the 90s, we kind of grew up as, I remember getting our first computer, and I remember, it not having a sound card. And then I remember like 5 years later getting a sound card, like that was a big deal, like it was, you kind of like built these machines, and we saw them evolve to, by the time I was in college, you had high speed internet and, or downloading music on Napster. That was impressive. when you look at it today, I mean, now it's like any song, any ever, you know, I can listen to on my phone. Like that concept even 20 years ago would have been mind boggling, you know? So it's changed so much and so fast. And I think the gap in generations, I'm really curious to see though now, as you know, and you have kids, I have kids, right? As we start aging. Oh, okay. Same difference. You know, but the idea is as we start aging, how now are the generations going to work together? What are we going to create? Because we know so much more together, you know what I mean, than we do apart, like you said. And really, I think we do have to be much more wiser about who we trust. You know what I mean? It's like you said, my parents would never give me the keys to the car or let me, you know, stay home alone, because they knew if I did that, there'd be a party and there would, you know, things would have gone wrong. But where we basically do that with technology, we give our kids, oh, here, set up my network and my router. And, you know, then you wonder why you can't see what they're looking at or what they're doing. And then you know, why your bank files got corrupted, and not by their fault, just because it's not really, just because they know how doesn't mean they can. And I think that's such an important concept, even business. Because someone knows how doesn't mean they can. And it's really, really important to sort of manage that and keep an eye on that, you know?
Well, I've been noticing that that particular mindset transfers over to other sectors of your business. You know, the same way people give their kid access to fix their computers, they also give their kid access to do their social media. They give their kid access, or their older daughter to do their taxes or their bookkeeping. And it's like, but these people aren't trained. You know, I understand when you're in a family affair, but there should be someone there to check that or help out, that maybe you pay once a month to look over their shoulder. So I see a lot of this in other sectors, and I keep hearing about it. You're like, oh, so just because your daughter has 10,000 people, you want to entrust her with your social media, and that's supposed to have her sell a T-shirt and see how many friends buy it.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? Let's translate that to what you're doing, selling things.
So, Seth, the big question for you then is, what's the solution?
For business, I'm still trying to figure it out. But in general, I would say that the answer I give for my industry, I think you would agree with, and others would agree in other aspect of business is yes, you can bring people on and train them up, but there has to be someone above them that can give them answers, or at least direct them and train them to a set standard. If I'm going to allow my daughter to do the bookkeeping, then once a month I'm going to have her talk to a bookkeeper, or twice a month till she gets to a certain standard. I'm going to let my son run my computers and that. Then once a month or whatever, right, every 2 months, I'm going to have an IT guy come in and work with them and deal with those things, so that keeping up and at least get up to a certain standard. And I would assume you would do the same thing for social media and other things. If you want to keep it and keep your costs down, you know, use your little cheap labor around you got all your kids and that.
Right.
But at least every so often you budget and bring someone in, whether it's a cousin that's an IT or social media or someone. It's better than having no knowledge.
And going back to the Bold Accelerator, I think that's one of the things that makes it great is, you know, for me, marketing and sales and all that stuff, it gives me access to such a high level person that I couldn't afford.
Right.
Like, I mean, you know, this guy's managing Pepsi, the Mets, you know, J-Lo, A-Rod. I mean, there's no way I could hire him to handle marketing for my business or my clients, but I could learn from him. You know what I mean? And I think like you hit the nail on the head. Like it's okay having him do this, but bringing the expert. And to me, the great thing, like I was saying about social media, is that we can now connect with these people as well. So I think, you know, you bring up a great point, and a lot of people say, well, how do we get them? Well, if your kid knows what they're doing, tell them to find somebody, and I guarantee they'll connect with an influencer who's a great accountant online, or an influencer who's a great, you know, like I know Albert Corey's putting out a lot of great content. You know, I mean, there's just tons of, you know, really great people that are able to, you know, do these things and are able to really, you know, mentor you, that you can find them. That's a great piece of advice. That's excellent. I love that.
Yeah. And one of the big things, especially when dealing with, like, I have an accountant, I've known him for 12 years. I'm a good friend of his. We're actually friends. We talk on the side and things like that. But one of the things is when I say, okay, I'm going to get a bookkeeper or something like that, either he can provide it, you know, relatively cheaply, or, well, I'm giving him too much credit on that, not too cheaply, but or he can train the people or talk to the people. He's willing to answer questions, you know, and direct you and help you and bring them up to standard. And I would do that for some one of my clients. If they said, well, I have a son, I'm a small business, and I'm going to allow my son to work with you, and no problem, I'm willing to help. You know, obviously some people try to take advantage of that, but I'm willing to help, you know. So that's one of the biggest things. You get your kid up to standard. If your kid loves social media, it's like my sister years ago when we were kids, she wanted to be a vet. So she realized that you had to cut open cats and dogs and every other animal. No, she couldn't do that. So she didn't want to be a vet. You know, so your kid may not want, he likes social media because he gets the likes and he can put up dumb stuff, gets all these people, but the minute he has to make a business of it, he may not like it as much. So then you may find out there's another child or friend or family member, whoever it is, that may do well at that. So some people may not be in the right role that you have them. So that's another way to figure it out. And I think they talked about that at the accelerator, putting people in the right role. So if you find, that's one way to figure it out. Get a standard. Once you set that standard, then everybody gets to meet it. So
awesome. Putting
the kids into spots that they are not adept at, it's just a disaster. And I see it a lot with a lot of companies with different things. I was just talking to a bunch of women, older women who are like, you know, past retirement, and it was just in passing, and they were at a table and they were talking about, oh, this, you know, we invest and we do different things. So what's your recommendation on this? And so I was just telling them, look, do it the old ways. Everybody has to learn part of what they need to do. It's old school. Go back to old school principles. Everybody has to live up to a set standard, and everybody's happy.
Yep.
You know, one thing I think the technology does is that everybody thinks you could throw out the old. And I think we keep revisiting that through the decades and through every generation. You can't throw out the old because the lessons learned are there. The lessons learned are there. You know, why repeat those lessons? Because they still hold true. It's still the foundation of business. Everything they learned in the 20s is still the foundation of business today. Brian was saying everything they learned on marketing and sales back in the 20s when they were doing radio is still relevant today.
Yeah, the methods work. The methods work. It's the application, you know? Yeah, exactly. And it's just the methods work. You just got to figure out what's the medium you need to use.
Right.
You know, and it's like, everybody's like, well, you know, everyone says, oh, you put out a lot of content, you do this. I said, listen, I really don't put out that much content.
Right, comparatively.
You know, I really, you know, I have old content I repurpose. I go live once a week, and then I do a podcast once a week. You know, but for me, it's the bus stop analogy, right? Like if I'm present and I'm front facing, and like I said, it's nothing new. Real estate agents have been doing it forever. Billboards have been around forever. It's the same thing now on social media. But if you're constantly putting out content and people know what they want to do, like you said, hey, will you be on my podcast? You know, there's a fit. You know what I mean? There's people have been like, I don't know what Mike does, but anytime anyone says that they're in business, I tell them they need to talk to Mike. So, you know, it's more like you said, the skills and techniques don't change. It's the medium, and then it's learning the people that leverage the medium, you know, differently. You know, has the game of baseball changed in the last, 100 years? No. Has the way it's been played and the methodologies and the technology and the techniques? Yes, but it's still hit ball with stick, run around base. Like it's not, it's not much more complicated than that at its core, but the things around it have gotten a little more complicated, but it doesn't mean that it's not learnable. It doesn't mean that you can't understand the game still. It doesn't mean that, the basics aren't there. It's just the medians in which we've gone deep and understood it that much more and gotten better at it, which is why people are suggesting you hire a hitting coach for a 6-year-old. It's changed, which is okay. You know what I mean? But like you said, at the core, a lot of the fundamentals, and sometimes we get so far away from the fundamentals. And I think that's the biggest mistake a lot of people make. They think the fundamentals don't need to be acknowledged anymore.
Right.
Well, the fundamentals, we don't need to pay attention to those, or we don't need to understand that. It's like, no, you do. You know, you just need to do it from a different angle, and you need to use that. You know, someone already gave you the knowledge, so you know the road is there. You still got to drive on it. You know what I mean? If you don't get in the car and you don't drive, you're not going to go. So no, sounds good. Well, good stuff, man. This has been fun.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you coming, man. Any other final thing that you want to ask, or anything you want to share out on the business?
No, like I said, I just appreciate it. You know, it's been a really fun conversation. I hope your audience enjoyed it. I'll definitely share it out on my podcast as well. If anyone wants to learn more about me or connect, you can just go to Mike Ficara. That's Mike, Ficara.com if you want to learn more about me and connect with me on social media. I always love that. I have my own podcast as well, thestartdown.com. Same thing like you, talking about just great things in business, connecting with great people, having, exciting people like yourself on. So, would love to connect with everyone in your audience and would love to, see if I could help anyone out there. Always open to have a conversation. So,
All right, man. Thank you very much for your time once again, man. Have a great day.
all right, brother. You do the same, man. I appreciate you.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Seth.
And you can head over to MFE WareGeeks website at www.waregeeks.com. That's WareGeeks.com. Number is 877-653-7146.